So today, walking through the woods, taking a hike, looking for wild edibles, pretty much just scouting out an area, not really collecting today, more just seeing what there is for future use. Time of year, it is late summer. This plant here, false Solomon seal, it's an edible plant. When the berries are red, these are not red, they look kind of gray or white, so I think I'm going to leave that alone. So the plant we're looking at here is false Solomon seal. False Solomon seal, when the berries are ripe, they are red, and those are edible. Not to be confused with true Solomon seal. Solomon seal is a plant that is poisonous, and all parts of that plant are poisonous. This is the false Solomon seal, and only the red berries are edible. I would show a comparison here, except I did not find any true Solomon seal plants to show for a comparison. So look that up for yourself and get familiar with it before eating any berries from this plant or any plants that look similar. This plant here with these wonderful looking flowers is jewelweed, and jewelweed this time of year gets these pods. They almost look like a bean, and what's really neat about these, when they're just right, they actually explode. Let's see if I can. That one's not ready. They get kind of dry and they puff up. Oh, here's one. I busted it. Here's one puffed up, ready to pop. I'll see if I can make it pop on camera. There, they just kind of explode. I mean, you give them a delicate squeeze and they'll just pop. Sometimes you just touch them and they'll explode. Alright, here's a couple more. Whoop! Just touched it. It blew up. Yeah, you don't always have to squeeze them. Sometimes just a delicate touch. So bees love these flowers. I'm going to move the camera, see if I can get you a better shot. So bees love these flowers. They're kind of bag-like. And the bee will crawl in there pretty much all the way down in there. Very beautiful flower in the woods. So jewelweed, as I understand, it has some medicinal purposes, and not sure if that thing's edible or not. I think the narrator will fill us in. So jewelweed is considered edible. It must be cooked before eating. It does have some compounds in it that will cause diarrhea, but upon cooking it, it can be consumed. Jewelweed is not a very tasty plant, and so it's not really sought after for eating. So as I said, this time of year that I'm doing this is end of summer, and in my opinion that's a very good time to be foraging. All the fruits of that the various plants produce are basically ready for picking at the end of the summer. In addition, this is not an instructional video giving definitive anything. This is just what I do and how I do it. Why am I laying on the ground? I found some plants down here, right here. Plantain. what it's called. That's the leaf. It has some medicinal properties, and it is edible. I think there's a limit to how much of it you can eat, but it is an edible plant. Not too bad. Kind of a bitter taste right now, this time of year. In the springtime, it's much better. Also down here we have dandelion growing. Dandelion is also an edible, and I know this is bitter. When you get to this time of year, they get very bitter. In the springtime, these are very good. Dandelion is, people often notice it by its flower, but if you can learn to identify that leaf, see the jagged edges, the long jagged edges, it usually grows in yards. This was brought over from Europe as a garden plant, and today it runs wild pretty much in most of North America. Dandelion greens are actually very good to eat. They're better in the spring. This late in the year, they are going to be bitter. The whole plant is edible. The root, the leaf, the flower. Also down here in this area is clover. Clover is also edible. There are a couple different kinds of clover. There is sorrel or wood sorrel, which most people would call a clover. It looks very similar to this, and it produces a yellow flower. This type of clover is called alsike, and it produces a white flower. I don't see any flowering right now to show you the flower. I wish I had, but you'll just have to take my word for it. You can look up more about it. Other kinds of clover that people may be familiar with is alfalfa, which is used as a hay and planted as a hay product, and it has a purple flower as well. This is the flower of alsike clover. White flower. See how close I can get and have focus. But yeah, that's alsike clover, what the flower looks like. Sometimes they have a little bit of pink in them as well, but they're mostly white. So all three types of clover are edible, and I actually have some here to show you. This, if you can see the leaf, see, this is sorrel. This has the heart-shaped leaf. There are 3 heart-shaped leaves. That's sorrel. The alsike clover, which produces a white flower, is actually over here. It has 3 leaves, and they are round. That is alsike clover. This is sorrel. Both are edible. And as I said, also alfalfa is edible as well. And then the plantain, this is plantain growing here. A lot of people recognize the seed stalk, and this is the leaf. It grows in a sort of rosette type form. Here's another example right there. And dandelion, as you can see right there. Dandelion is actually a French word. Dandelion refers to the lion's tooth, so called because of the shape of the leaf. This is a young blackberry plant. It has 3 leaves. The 2 come out of the same spot on the stalk, and third one comes out on a little stalk a little bit higher. But some people might confuse it with poison ivy, but if you look at the stem has thorns, as well as it has this purpley, whitish purpley look, and if you happen to rub on it, that powdery look rubs off, and it's very thorny, and it will have berries, blackberries. This is a wild blackberry plant. No blackberries on this one. Wow, look at that thing. What is that? Giant hornet looking. Is that on camera? Yeah. Man, that thing's huge. It's like 2 inches long. All right, looking for wild edibles. This tree right here, this is a shagbark hickory tree. Shagbark hickory. Hickory trees grow nuts. Okay, looking on the ground underneath the shagbark hickory tree, there are nuts, and they look like this. Little balls with 4 sections. And see them in different stages here. This one's not opening up. This one is opening up, and this one's all brown and really opening up. And what it is these just kind of come off of the nut pretty easy when they're brown. If they're starting to open like this, still a little bit green, take a little more work, but they do come out, see? And you get the nut out. And you get enough of these, you can dry them and eat them. You can roast them, or you could probably eat them like this if you can get into them. They're very hard. You'll need a rock or a hammer or the end of your knife. If you have a little pummel on the end of your knife, you can put it on a rock and smash it, get into the nut that way. Here are the leaves of the hickory tree. A little bit difficult to see. They're starting to dry out, but yeah, that's what the leaf looks like. So the leaf of the hickory, there are 5 leaves. 2 are coming out opposite of each other, right, like here at the bottom. Then you have 3, 2 coming out at the same point here. The other one has its own little stalk there, where it comes out just a little bit from the other, but yeah, that is the leaf of the hickory tree. These tall plants behind me here, these are wild lettuce. Some people call it a giant lettuce, but it is wild lettuce, and it is considered a medicinal plant. Its leaves are very similar to the dandelion. Its stalk is covered with little hairs. If you break the plant, it does seep a milky sap. It has flowers, yellow flowers. The flowers grow out where the stem or the leaf comes out of the stalk. There will be a flower at each place where each leaf comes out. The leaf looks very similar to the dandelion, just more jagged, much larger. The plant itself gets about 8 feet tall. The top of it gets these flowering, lots of flowers at the top, and they turn and have these fuzzy seeds, and they happen everywhere. This one's even taller. This one's maybe 10 feet tall even. They get quite tall. Very interesting plant. It's wild lettuce, and they are a medicinal plant. I understand as you eat them, there is a limit to how much you can eat. I'm not sure what that is. You'll need to look up those details more. But it is good for headaches, pain. It is a pain reliever. Wild lettuce. So this plant here in front of me is stinging nettle. As you can see, the underside of the leaf covered with stings. The stalk itself, hope you can see that there are tons of hair-like stings all over. If you brush those, you'll just be full of stings. This is an edible plant though, if you can deal with the stings. This is the leaf. And the leaves aren't so bad, but the rest of the plant is covered with stings. This is the flowering top. As you can see, hope you can see that on camera. There are stings all over most parts of the stem of this plant. It's just covered. But the leaves are edible, and if you rub the stings off of the leaves and the stalks, those are considered an edible plant. But right here with it, we have another edible plant. It is a legume, and I'll adjust the camera here. It is growing up the stinging nettle and also up the plants beside it. And this is called ground bean. Now I'll just pull a leaf off here to show you a little better. A lot of people would mistake this as being poison ivy, and it's not. I didn't get a very good specimen here. That leaf has been eaten. It's very similarly to poison ivy and most other plants that have 3 leaves. These 2 lower ones are coming out of the same point, and the top one has a little bit of stem before it starts. But if you look at it, if you're familiar with garden plants, this plant looks, to me at least, and to most other people who are familiar with it, it reminds them of green bean. It looks like a green bean plant, except it's much, much smaller. And you'll see this, it'll grow in a vine, very fine vine, if I can get a close-up of it. The vines are almost hair-like. They're very thin, I would say 1/16 of an inch or less. You can see it wrapping around this other plant. The ground bean plant is this little vine. It's not this other one. This thicker plant is something else. But the ground bean is this thin plant that wraps itself all around these other plants in order to grow. And the ground bean produces 2 fruits. It produces a bean that looks pretty much like a green bean or a pea pod. See if I can find some. I hadn't found any previously, and I'm not seeing any now, but they grow on the surface just like green beans do, very similarly. And then there is a second fruit that it produces, which is a round bean that is in the ground. It's also referred to as ground nut because of the bean that grows in the ground, and that's the bean that you see more often. When people talk about ground nut or ground bean, what they are often referring to eating is the little bean that it produces underground. If you scrounge around, it's not usually very deep. It's pretty much on the surface or just under the surface, an inch. It usually is in fairly loose soil or in the forest floor with the leaf debris and different things barely covering it. So you don't have to dig very far to find the beans. They're often confused with pebbles. They look very similar, and you have to basically wash them before you can really tell the difference between the ground nut and a pebble. They do produce a aerial bean or seed pod above ground, similar to the green bean, how green beans would produce. And it's a very small bean, but you could collect and eat those as well. Those are edible. The trouble with collecting those is typically wildlife eats them before you really see them. So a lot of people don't even know that there is a bean that is produced above ground as well on the plant. Okay, the above ground pod on the ground bean, I found some here. As you can see, it's more like a pea. Some people would refer to it as a pea or a green bean, but it has 3 little seeds inside of it, and that little thing is edible. But like I say, usually, first of all, they're very small. I mean, to eat that, you're going to have to eat a whole lot of them to really fill you up. They're very small, and typically the wildlife will get these before you do. So most people, are not even aware of these little pods, but yeah, they're there as well. And there's another one. So yeah, and another one here. Oh, this one was bitten off. Yeah, things come along and eat them fairly quickly. This is an elderberry plant. Elderberry has these nodules all over the bark. Very knobby. The leaf of the elderberry, well, there's a whole bunch of leaflets on there. Lighter on the back. I just know what they look like, so that's how I identify them. I've seen them so much that I pretty much just know when I see one. But they get these little berries, about an 1/8 inch in diameter, and I'm not seeing any on this bush at all. Yeah, I'm not seeing any berries at all on that elderberry bush. But the berries are very small, like BBs, about an 1/8 inch diameter, little circles, and they get dark purple, almost black. It is a medicinal plant. It is considered medicinal. Some people have problems eating very much of it. Some people make pies out of it, out of the berries. Some people say that you can have too much of it. I've never had a problem with it, but we do mostly use it as a medicinal plant. It's very good for colds and flu, things like that. This is wild rose. This it's thorny. It often gets confused with blackberries and raspberries, but it is a wild rose bush, and they get these little berries that grow behind the flower. These would be the rose hips, just like if you buy rose hips in a gourmet grocery store. These are the wild version, same thing. The leaf of the wild rose bush. And the stem, of course, has thorns all over it, just like any rose bush does. All right, coming along, we have a wild grapevine. This is the Muscadine Grapes growing in a maple tree, and has a good bit of grapes on it. Usually a wild grapevine will grow up a tree much higher and only produce grapes up toward the top. They're usually quite high. But yeah, here they are. And they're not very big. And they're mostly, they're good for juice or jelly. They have a good sized seed in the middle. So they're not really great for fresh eating grapes, but yeah. It's a nice cluster there, but yeah. Wild grapevine, Muscadine Grapes. Well, that's pretty much it for this one. Hope you liked the video. If you did, please hit like and subscribe to our channel if you haven't done that already. And if you like to receive notifications when we put up the next video, hit that notification bell. All right, thanks. See you on the next one.